That was a piece of miscellaneous other business stuff I did, public speaking, seminars, yada. Took 32 minutes. I think this next section will take roughly the same. And here we go. Going to talk about writing. W-R-I-T-I-N-G, not what you do with horses. I was in the Omaha World Herald twice. Not a big thing, but I suppose most people aren't. One, I appeared in a sports page, and I referenced Warren Buffett and his investment philosophy, which was buy and hold, and watch your holdings slowly increase in value. Well, right after the Huskers' heyday, which ended in 97, say 99, 2000, all kinds of people were pissed because we were no longer the dominant force. And I wrote a little piece in the sports page, and the sum of it was, hold the Huskers. Don't sell them, hold them. They'll be back. It'll just take some time. Obviously, 25 years later, that was a lie. The other one, I did a 2-column, 9-inch tall piece on that bigger program, LB 775. People were griping that we're just spending the state's money on companies that don't need it. And so I explained why they do need it. And if you were in Scotts Bluff, Nebraska, you should be cheering for these Omaha Lincoln companies that are using it, because the growth that they would realize and enjoy would reduce everybody's tax burden because of all the outside jobs that were being created. So that was Omaha World Herald. I don't know that you're aware of this, but it could be. 3 years ago now, when COVID hit, they recommended 6 feet of distance between people so that COVID didn't sneak up on you when you were within the 3-foot talking zone. So, my sister Diane and I met with a guy named Al Maxey in Lincoln. Al had been a UNL basketball player of some fame back in those days. And he took Di's idea, which was to turn these 6-foot wooden rods into works of art. So you're carrying it around with you to, kind of fake, keep your distance. And they were beautiful. So Di had some half-crappy name for it, and Al Maxey didn't improve on it. Well, I called it distance assistance. And as a result, there was an article on Al doing this, and I get mentioned for coming up with the name. little charity stuff I've been involved in. Downtown Rotary was kind of the primo Omaha Service Club. I finagled my way in there. Southwest Sertoma, I got into. Big group. They would have 100 people at their weekly lunch meeting. So did a lot of good things. Southwest Sertoma, yet another. I was on their board toward the end of my tenure there, along with young Roxy Orr. Another service club thing. Somebody lined up a group of 7 Russian judges to come to Omaha, get a brief tour of the city, and then observe the legal system top to bottom, local, county, state, feds. And they were here for 5 days, day 1 tour, and then each day they'd follow one of these other levels. That was really interesting. I drove the van, extended van, that housed all these guys during the day. Oddly got to know them pretty well, even though their Russian or their English was far from great, and my Russian was non-existent. I bought an English to Russian, Russian to English book to try to kind of piece together sentences that worked, but it really didn't work. I was living in the lake house on Timber Lodge Lake that Fifi and I lived in. And I used to get that whole crew out to the lake house and feed them. And we had a pool table in that place. And Ryan was coming over and playing pool with these dudes. And Russian vodka is theoretically, if not the best in the world, right up there. And they gave me 3 bottles of it in thanks. The only sad thing, I don't drink vodka, so they just sat on a shelf in our room. Another charity thing, I helped a guy named Roy Stevens, who at one point was my best friend, helped him start the Missing Youth Foundation, and started it. I gave him $10,000 and he was off to the races. I was there, as an advisor, but I certainly wasn't day to day. And any successes that group had, and it had some, were all him. It was about missing youth. So, stranger obstructions are almost non-existent when kids turn up missing. Usually, a family member abducts them, usually as a result of a divorce and not being happy with the visitation deal. Roy was a past master at finding these kids. He had a famous case, a young gal like 10, who lived in Norfolk, who had gotten abducted, and that case became nationally famous, and Roy was on 60 Minutes. He was on 2020, like a handful of national TV programs talking about what he did, talking about Jill Cutchell was her name, being abducted, and what he was doing. It is hard to get a murder conviction if you don't have a body. Roy got this dude sent off to jail for some double digits number of years without the body. He had so much circumstantial evidence. So that was cool. Commercials. Of course I've done commercials. Sherry and I got LASIK at age 40. That's where they go in with a laser and fix your eyes. And my usual BSing self, I had gotten to know their staff very well, and when we were done with the steps in the treatment, they asked me whether I would be in their marketing video. And of course I said, shit, I've done 10 feature films. Obviously I'll help you. So once again, VHS tape in my possession, and my little bit, minute long piece of that ad. And then I got hearing aids, which I don't wear, and the people that sold them to me and kept them running well did a print ad, like newspaper magazine thing, and once again they did the smart thing and asked me to be a part of that picture campaign. And sure enough, I was in their next batch of brochures. They were obviously geniuses. Okay, failed business ventures. I have 11. I won't drone on very long about each one. Number one, when I was a CPA, one of my clients, also a good friend he had turned into, named Joe Scott, lived in Orlando and knew about a beautiful newer high-rise building that just sat there. The developers couldn't get the deal done, and so Joe and I took a swing at owning that thing and turning it into a timeshare. Unfortunately, didn't work. I spent a solid month in Orlando. Next, what we called FEDR, F-E-D-R, which was Field Economic Development Resources. And I called it field at the front end as a tip of the hat to Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And I spent $100,000 on that. It was an economic development program, online subscription service. And the theory was, if Nebraska practitioners are ignorant of this, almost certainly the whole country is ignorant of it. So we put that together, including what the website would look like and do, and went into the market to try to raise $7 million and build this thing out. The problem is, literally the month that we went into the market, the NASDAQ crashed. NASDAQ, tech-oriented companies, computer technology. And therefore, nobody even wanted to talk about doing something with it, not because it wasn't a good idea, but, you know, they've seen too many failures recently. Another acronym, the BREDA Group, B-R-E-D-A. I'm having trouble with my tripod suddenly. Hold on. That should fix it. Business and real estate development something. What was the A? Doesn't matter. The idea with that is use other people's money to do real estate development, which I had some experience with, not a ton, and help them grow their businesses for sale. A recurring theme with me. Not very expensive, 90 days put into it, but never got off the ground. We, CFO services, had been working in Kansas and Oklahoma in addition to Nebraska. When I sold CFO to John Blowbaum, Chad Denton, I kept Nebraska and Oklahoma because I was still interested in them, and they weren't. They just wanted Nebraska. I hired a guy who I had worked with before, who was another one of those wizards of telemarketing. And I paid him $25,000 part-time over a course of a year, and it was a total zero. Then that friend Mary K. Mueller and two of her friends wanted to do something called comfort cards. And you'd stick a suction cup on a mirror, there'd be a wire coming down, and there would be these cards that would hook onto the wire and help you get through grieving. Therefore, comfort cards. Dud. $10,000 into that, 90 days. A real time eater was Zango. Zango was a miracle drink and a multi-level marketing thing. And Omaha had done nothing, and people had tried, done nothing. I went out to Salt Lake City, which was the headquarters of Zango. There were 4 founders. I met with all of them as a group, and they would give me any resource I needed to get involved, make this work. By the way, Barb Lamori, a real good friend at the time, probably my #1 female friend at the time, had been doing Zango, but just farting around with it, wasn't making hardly any money. So Barb is the one who got me hooked into that. Over the course of a year, one thing or another, I spent 20 grand. And interesting deal the way it turned out. What you're looking for is some success of your own selling the products, but more importantly, bringing in people under you, like Amway, who would take off selling this and getting their own people. And here's what my problem is. I literally saw 50 people over the course of a year who were friends or acquaintances of mine in the business community. And in every single case, I would say, this isn't going to eat any of your time. I mean, almost literally, I'll run the traps for you. You just need to provide the people to talk to. And, well, Phil, what do you think I can make? And I said, well, if it goes reasonably well, 25 to 50 grand a year. Universally, I heard, yeah, you know, though, Phil, that just sounds like a distraction. I don't believe it's not going to take any of my time. And my second problem is I'm making boo-coo bucks. And an extra 25,000 is pretty much, what's the word I want? Uninspiring. So, didn't work. Put together something called Business Fundamentals. And I worked on this with my good friend Norm Lund, who had an amazing track record in business. Threw about 50 grand into that, various expenditures. One more near total dud. However, we had a process, we had brochures, we had business cards that explained what the process was, and then we had scads of documents that we would use to help shore up all different kinds of business issues within their company. Things like financing, sales, marketing. We had the whole outline or skeleton there. Couldn't get it sold. And the good news is, and this is correct, 15 years later, I now have that skeleton or outline, and I'm restarting that concept late January, early February. And I already have a couple of clients signed up who had known me in past lives to do that work. And I think our biggest problem back then when we started Business Fundamentals was pricing. We wanted a relatively big fee up front. People would tell us, well, we aren't going to do that. This business you're brand new to, we'd be giving you a chunk of money, which was like $15,000, hoping you're going to be good. What we would rather do is tell you we want to look at this set of issues in that order and pay you as we go. Well, being stubborn, stupid, I wouldn't do that. A dog. When I had left CFO Services, it had been 20-ish almost 30 years since I had done CPA work. Decided I wanted to get my toe back in the water, so hunted up a small CPA firm that I could have an impact on. That turned out to be Rand Hansen. 2 years I was there, torturous, because I was 20 years out of date, and Rand wanted me to do effectively bookkeeping for some of his clients, which I had never done any. I graduated with 36 hours, 12 courses times 3 hours each. In accounting, I had never done any of it. I hired people to do it. And my entire business career, I've done that. I don't do things I won't enjoy, and I will do things that I'm incompetent at if I can find the right person to hire. So my Rand experiment totally sucked. Real recently, Judy Sands, referenced above at CFO, she's the one I hired and fired 3 times. I asked Judy to help me with something called the Employee Retention Tax Credit, ERTC. Didn't spend a ton on this, $10,000, but I spent 3 or 4 uninterrupted months. These would have been huge fees. I mean, 50,000 would be nothing. Could be 100, could be more. But the further I got into it, I found out the IRS had a 2-year backlog to process these claims. It was somewhat well known, and when CPA types would find out you could make these massive contingent fees, they kind of flooded the market. So, and then the other thing, 2 years to get paid, but also for 2 years, I'd have no idea whether I was doing it correctly. And I'm kind of big on dotting the I's, crossing the T's, doing things the way they're supposed to be done. So, short time on that, couple of months. For 3 months, I went to Kansas City 3 or 4 days a week to work on my previously mentioned friend, Mary Kay Mueller, who had a concept called 8 to Great, the number 8 to Great. And it was 8 concepts that if you learned and followed would change your life. It was far enough along in its development that I was interested. Mary Kay is probably the worst business person I know. She's aware of this. So she was thrilled for me to get involved. Didn't work. And the reason this one didn't work, Mary Kay, in addition to being a horrid business person, is the most creative person I've ever known. And by that, this gal can play piano. she is a public speaker, gets paid well for that. She wanted to try some acting, so she was in a couple of Omaha Community Playhouse productions, only 2 years, year one, year two. In each year, she was chosen as the best performer at the Omaha Community Playhouse. She writes music, a lot of it religious, inspirational. There are half a dozen or more songs that we sing at Sacred Heart that she wrote. And she started the gospel choir at Sacred Heart, where I go, and wrote these songs. They're part of the curriculum, etc. And my last failure, keep smiling. And the idea was, the simple part of it was, when you buy something anywhere, retail transaction, what do people say? Well, they say, "Have a nice day." And you say, as you're walking away, already back turned to them, "Hey, you too." And this goes on all day, every day. So I came up with the idea that people should say, "Keep smiling," when they went through that checkout line and in all phases of life. And I did market research to see whether my idea made any sense at all to anybody else, and that came back very positively. Ellen DeGeneres was the one person I thought of when I thought keep smiling. Fabulous smile, widely known. Well, I was working with her attorney on getting this thing off the ground, and all of a sudden I had bipolar disorder problems that made me just boom, end it. Pity. Okay, those are failures. Okay, another break, and I'm going to talk about two topics. One is medical stuff, and the other is younger than I look. I am younger than people think based on my look. Good point, people. So I'll be back. We'll knock that out. Medical, younger than I look.